We look at, for example, the United States today. Anything coming out of the Republicans, the Democrats will hate it. Anything out of the Democrats, the Republicans will hate it. Taking off the tariff war, tariffs against China, will immediately help in reducing inflation, which has reached historic highs. No, they don't do it because they do politics.
Now I give the floor to Mr. Charles Liu. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. Good to see you again. Common prosperity. The way I remember it in China, at the founding of the People's Republic, it was common poverty. It's a miracle that China has achieved the growth and the wealth creation that has occurred over the last half a century. It's just never happened in human history. Something like that has occurred. But it can occur. It can also lead to serious problems which extremes of capital can create. Like what we see in the United States. It's no longer a question of inequality. It is just as clearly unfairness. I would not look at common prosperity as a drive to create equality, because there will never be equality in the absolute sense. What we should seek is fairness. Now, what we see in China today is there's been creation of so much value and wealth that the disparity or the unfairness of it all is beginning to creep up. And much of this is based on how the market economy as defined by the West operates. The market economy, even in the turn of the 20th century, I think, 19th to the 20th century, the US had to have the Sherman Act to break up the monopolies which existed. Standard Oil of New Jersey, AT&T, they were all broken up because what does monopoly do? It creates inefficiencies and it extracts value from the consumer. And it's really, really unfair. So even the US had to face that issue. But the last 20 years, of course, capital has run rampant and has become such a dominating force to the point where in the US you have the numbers which were cited by Professor Zhang of top 1% is so much more than the bottom 50% or 60%. So China has to address this before it occurs. Watch out for oligopolies and monopolies. Watch out for inefficiencies which a dominance of capital in the market economy can lead to. And this, I think, is how China is addressing the common prosperity issue. What is also very significant is the government issue. What we're doing with common prosperity is preparing for the next phase of China's growth and development. When the government takes its job seriously, it intends to improve society as a whole, to create fairness instead of being beholden to vested interests. It's very dangerous if China went down the route of the Western market forces driven economies. I think this is what the Chinese government has demonstrated it is watching out for and is being very, very careful about. And it's, I think, critical for continued development of China. Now, when you have a government that thinks about the overall well-being of society, then you plan and execute and strategize accordingly. We look at, for example, the United States today. Anything coming out of the Republicans, the Democrats will hate it. Anything out of the Democrats, the Republicans will hate it. Taking off the tariff war, tariffs against China, will immediately help in reducing inflation, which has reached historic highs. No, they don't do it because they do politics. That's a government which is not looking at the overall well-being of society as a whole, but small package of vested interest. There are some philosophical issues here. It's because I think most Western government is based philosophically on individuals, while 3,000 years of Chinese history is based on betterment of societies, starting with family, but going into societies. I think what we should do in terms of common prosperity in the Chinese context is not impose this on our friends from Bangladesh or anybody else, but I think sharing this experience of what we have done in China, the stage of development we've reached, and hence what we should plan for in the future, that type of experience I think can be very valuable for other developing countries. There are developing countries which are today still at common poverty level, and it will take some time for them to reach the level where there will be a sufficient accumulation of wealth to be able to better their entire livelihood. So they have to go through some of these phases. But China is at a specific phase, and I think the Chinese experience and the Chinese government execution of betterment of society as a whole is something that is really worthwhile for a lot of developing countries, not to emulate, but to take as an example and work with. Thank you.
So thank you, Charles, for your insightful, informative, and even philosophical remarks. And thank you very much.